morning, everybody. Happy Friday. Happy Friday before Memorial Day. My name is Marion Reich. I'm the president of Global Ties Detroit. We welcome you here to Techtown. And for those of you who don't know us, Global Ties Detroit is the private sector nonprofit partner to the U.S. Department of State for professional exchanges. We support the work of the Department of State by connecting international emerging leaders with their counterparts right here in Detroit and Southeast Michigan. For example, today we have more than 50 delegates and fellows here, including fellows, the entrepreneurial fellows from the Western Hemisphere, from the MENA region, Middle East, North Africa. We also have delegates from Asia, Europe, and Eurasia right now in town. We do the work to build trust and to promote opportunity to engage with emerging leaders, and to what we call it citizen diplomacy, promoting peace and prosperity around the world. And talking about peace and prosperity, we are thrilled to host the U.S. APEC 2023 Minority-Owned Small Business Roundtable right here today. I want to thank our Global Ties Detroit Board of Directors, and if you could just please stand to the Board of Directors. We have several here, or raise their hands. So thank you to the Board of Directors. We also are hosting this in partnership with the MEDC. Today the MEDC is represented by Ed Clementi to my left, who is the Senior Advisor for Trends and Development, and also the podcast host of the Michigan Opportunity. And we also have Chris McLean today from the MEDC. We also are here in Techtown, which is Detroit's oldest incubator, accelerator, co-working space. We're delighted to have our offices here. Also, the International Trade Administration, the U.S. Commercial Service, has its offices in town as well. Well, today we're very delighted to have three high-level officials from Washington, D.C. with us. We have in the middle U.S. Senior Official for APEC, Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation, Matt Murray. We have Special Representative Dilawar Syed from the Commercial and Business Affairs Office of the U.S. Department of State. And here we also have the Pamela Phan from the International Trade Administration, U.S. Department of Commerce. We thank you very much for your hard work in what you do to serve our country and to make better relations, better trade, increase prosperity all around the world. We're also pleased to have Jennifer Lafredo, our friend from upstairs on the third floor, the East Michigan offices for the U.S. Commercial Service, U.S. Department of Commerce. Most importantly, I want to thank you here, all the business owners, stakeholders, community leaders. We look forward to hearing from you. We want to hear your voices, and we truly appreciate your time and attendance. This event, as you can see, is open to the press. We have media representatives, and we thank them for their interest as well. So we're going to get started right away because time is short. Your time's important. We want to also get our weekend started as well. So that's why we started bright and early. And I'm going to ask our senior official, Murray, to please start. Thank you, Murray.
Sure. Well, thank you very much. It's such an honor to be here, and thank you very much to Global Ties Detroit and the Michigan Economic Development Council. But most importantly to all of you for being here. I was looking at the list. It's a very impressive group that we have in the room, and so we're really honored to be here. It's also a real honor for us to host APEC meetings in Detroit these couple of weeks. We started last week where we had the Transportation Ministerial meeting. So Secretary of Transportation Pete Buttigieg was here. And now we have the trade ministerial meetings going on right now with U.S. Trade Representative Catherine Tai is here with her counterparts. And there's a handout here in the package that explains what APEC is if you're not familiar with it. But just the short version is it's a grouping of 21 economies from around the Pacific Rim, including partners in Asia, but also in Latin America, that have come together for the last 30 plus years to talk about and try to advance understandings on trade and investment, on innovation, and on sustainable and inclusive growth. And so it's a real tremendous opportunity for the United States this year because we're hosting the APEC meetings in the United States. And we have 5 stops along that journey. We started in Honolulu in December, then Palm Springs in February, now Detroit in May. We'll go to Seattle in August, and then we will wrap up with the APEC leaders meeting in November in San Francisco that President Biden will host. So it's a consensus-based, non-binding organization, and we work on a whole range of issues across the whole waterfront. And again, with the goal of promoting trade and investment around the region. And the 21 economies that we work with together account for half of global trade. So it's a pretty influential group. But one of the things that we really focus on, which I think is relevant for this morning's discussion and why we really wanted to come and hear from all of you, is that one of the big issues around APEC is economic inclusion. It's making sure that, for example, small and medium-sized enterprises are right at the front, at the forefront of what we're trying to do. It's one of the only international organizations that I know of that has a small and medium-sized enterprise ministerial that our Department of Commerce hosts, and Pam may talk about that a bit more. But it's really a tremendous place where we do put SMEs and SMEs access to supply chains and things right at the forefront of the agenda. Also on inclusion, it's a place where the U.S. is very proud of our legacy. The last time we hosted in 2011, that we launched work on women's economic empowerment to demonstrate that when women are able to fully participate in economies around our region, our economies are more prosperous, and that's an important part of what we want to try to accomplish in APEC. So we also are one of the only international organizations that has a Women in Economy ministerial level meeting, which we'll also have in August. And this year, interestingly, we're going to have a day of overlap between the Women in Economy Forum and the Small and Medium-Sized Enterprise Ministerial because of a lot of the unique issues that face women-owned small and medium-sized businesses. But inclusion, is more broad than that, obviously. We really want to work to do whatever we can to advance underrepresented groups across our country and across the region, and make sure that everybody has access to supply chains, access to markets. And so with that in mind, our theme for our APEC host year is creating a resilient and sustainable future for all. And as Ambassador Tai said at an event last night, it's really the for all part that's the important piece, because of wanting to make sure that we're able to lift up all our communities together. So, I think the important thing for us for today is we really want to hear from all of you. We want to hear what the opportunities are, what the challenges are, some of the things that you're facing when it comes to the region and to trade and investment, sustainability, innovation, et cetera. Because the input you give us can help inform our work. I've said in many other settings around the country that APEC, yes, I'm from the State Department and I'm a career diplomat, and APEC is a diplomatic engagement, but if it's not lifting up communities around our country, then it's not worth anything. If it's not supporting what our communities are trying to do, then we're failing, basically. So I want to make sure that we are engaging around the country, and obviously we have a great group today, Dilawar and Pam, who also come at this from their perspectives. And but it's really terrific to be here. We do hope, I think on the sheet, there's also, we have a LinkedIn page for our APEC host year, which we really want to make sure that people are able to follow what's going on through that. We have an internet website, that we want to make sure people are able to follow, because we do want to make sure this is a journey that we can all go on together as we go through the year and beyond this year. So I'll stop there and pass on to
Special Representative
Dilawar.
Thank you.
Who is an amazing champion for all these issues and a great mentor, at the State Department, and someone really appreciate all of his activities. He's traversed the country and done even way more of this than I have. So.
Well, thank you, Matt. Thank you for your leadership. It comes at a historic time. We're hosting APEC for the first time since 2011. Wonderful meeting all of you. I come to this role and government from private sector. So I spent more than 20 plus years in Silicon Valley building tech companies. And at the same time, I've also been an advocate for businesses and inclusive growth in all sorts of roles. And so my perspective as we sit in this great privilege to speak on behalf of our government is that I've been in your shoes, and I've been in the shoes of all those amazing entrepreneurs, aspiring entrepreneurs, entrepreneurs in communities of color, women, veteran, who you are serving. And one of the things that I feel, and many of us feel very strongly, and this goes to the President's focus on equity, is that we have to democratize access to our resources. For someone who's new to government, in 15 months since I was appointed by the President to this job, I'm amazed at how much resource exists at the federal government across, obviously, Commerce Department, State Department. To give an example, at State, where I drive commercial diplomacy globally, there are 1,500 economic officers around the world in 200 plus embassies and missions around the world. Part of our jobs of our ambassadors is to be the chief business officers, but most people don't know. Most people don't know how to get access to those amazing resources. Some of the smartest people I've worked with, missionary people I've worked with. So, as Matt alluded to, I've been striving to, if you will, democratize access to our amazing resources, both within the office that I run, but also across the department, and hear from you all. And a huge part of that is driven by the belief that the private sector is a force for good globally. And in our model, we need to deploy all our resources to make the world a better place. Something that I've talked about in my outreach is that we as a country are faced, as a world are faced with an extraordinary moment right now. When you saw the pandemic affected every single community, we're still recovering from it. Every place that I've been, and I've gone to 17 countries in 15 months, we see this dislocation because of the pandemic in all places. We haven't seen something like this once in 100 years. Second, war in the heart of Europe, Ukraine. I actually joined the department 2 weeks before Russia attacked Ukraine. We've seen obviously the travesty within the country, but also its destabilizing effect all over the world. Food insecurity, energy insecurity, and unfortunately there's no end in sight. And hopefully soon we can start with reconstruction. Climate change. And by the way, that hostility we haven't seen in Europe in almost since the end of World War II. Climate change. You all are familiar with what's happening around the world, in our communities. In California, where I'm from, we had a drought for 10 years, and now we had atmospheric rivers pouring down on us. Why I'm bringing all this up? These are once-in-generational challenges, and our response has to be very vigorous in your role, and especially the role of entrepreneurs who can help us tackle global challenges, because we don't have all the resources of the federal government. We do obviously do some great aid, but we need global solutions coming from these communities. And what I've seen, as Matt said, as I go around the country, there's some amazing innovation coming through in our communities. I was in Dearborn yesterday. I'm spending some more time here. Impressed with what the communities are doing here. So we want to hear from you, what we can do to support you, how we can help sort of deploy you together with all of us to help move the world to a better place. So with that, I'll pass it on to Pam, and we'll continue the conversation.
Sure. Thank you, Dilawar, and thank you, Matt. Let me start by just expressing appreciation for the State Department as well as for Global Ties for organizing this event. It is wonderful to see such representation all across the room and such a diversity of faces and experiences. I did a little bit of research before coming here and discovered, with thanks to our MBDA, that's the Minority Business Development Agency within the U.S. Department of Commerce, that in the state of Michigan there are over 156,000 minority-owned businesses, and they employ over 180,000 individuals in the state of Michigan. And interestingly, of those minority-owned businesses, 54.4% are minority women-owned. So this conversation and this group that we've assembled today here is timely. Let me give you guys a sense of who I am and what I do and how we collaborate with our colleagues in 100 different cities all across the United States. I'm the Deputy Assistant Secretary of Commerce who's responsible for the Asia region. What that means is that I have a team at headquarters of about 30 people, and then a team that spans 17 different markets in the Asia region of about 300 people. Those are our boots on the ground. They're the folks who understand the markets there, have connections not only to the counterpart government officials, but also to local potential partners for U.S. companies that are interested in expanding into those markets. My role is really to work together with our headquarters team, as well as our team overseas, and with the export assistance centers that the U.S. Department of Commerce has in 100 different cities all across the United States, to think about programs, policies, and strategies that really help to strengthen U.S. commercial relations with Asia, but also U.S. commercial interests, including the interests of U.S. exporters and potential exporters. So it's great to be here at APEC. We're proud of the role that commerce plays at APEC, and it covers a range of issues from marine debris to climate to intellectual property and digital economy to women in e-commerce, cybersecurity, artificial intelligence. During this cluster of meetings that's happening in Detroit, we have actually been very actively engaged in the automotive dialogue, just to bring government and industry together and to talk about topics that are really contributing to the transition of our economies to that clean future. And then in Seattle, in August, as Matt had referenced, the Department of Commerce will be responsible for the SME ministerial. And that is an opportunity to engage with all of our partners from across the APEC economies to talk about what it is that we're doing to assist and support small and medium-sized enterprises in post-pandemic economic growth and recovery. So that is a strong focus of the work that we will be doing in August, and we hope to have further opportunities to engage with companies and representatives such as yourselves as we prepare for that SME ministerial. From a policy perspective, we are certainly guided by a number of administration priorities that have been set, including supply chain resilience, clean energy transition, digital transformation. As we engage with the partners in the region, part of our objective is to really deepen the alliances and the partnerships that we have across the region through bilateral dialogues, including at the secretarial level. In fact, the secretary is arriving any minute now, and I'm actually going to have to be leaving this event a little bit early as we prepare for a series of bilateral engagements that she has later today. We are in the midst of negotiating an economic framework with 13 other partner countries across the Indo-Pacific region, and that Indo-Pacific economic framework for prosperity helps us to advance some of these priorities that I talked about, such as supply chain resilience, the clean energy transition, and better governance, including when it comes to issues of taxation and corruption in these markets, so that these countries can build confidence and really have the enabling environment that is needed to bring you all in and to give you confidence that investing or exporting over to their markets is a good idea. So, that is our policy work, but really what we do best is the day-to-day counseling and engagement that we have with companies to help position you to better understand these markets overseas and to be able to learn of opportunities and be at the forefront of deals. This administration in particular has had an increasing focus on our outreach to historically underserved populations. While we have had a long history of engaging with small businesses about opportunities overseas, we've not done as good of a job reaching out to those businesses that might be owned by women, minorities, veterans in rural areas. And so that is something that we are ramping up. We're doing so because equity is a core priority of the administration. And it underpins everything that we do as we're reimagining how trade and commerce can serve all Americans. So with that in mind, I wanted to talk about two initiatives that we have been able to launch since 2021 before I hand it over to my colleague Jennifer to talk a little bit more about the services that our Export Assistance Centers provide. So the first initiative is the Global Diversity Export Initiative, GDEI. That was launched in 2021 by the Department of Commerce, specifically the International Trade Administration, which is the part of commerce that I sit in. What we are doing with GDI is ensuring that export opportunities are reaching a diverse range of U.S. businesses, including the 156,000 plus minority-owned businesses here in this state. And so GDEI is supposed to be developing and implementing export promotion solutions to serve the underserved communities that I've been talking about. And as I look around the room, I want to underscore that includes African American, Asian American, Hispanic American, Native American, veteran, disabled, LGBTQ, and women-owned businesses. The second initiative that I want to talk about is kind of a pet project of mine, something that we launched just in March, actually, when we were in Thailand. It's called Empower Asia, and it stands for export markets providing opportunities for women's economic rise in Asia. And so what we're trying to do with Empower Asia is really highlight the vital role that women play in the economy and to expand the opportunities that are available to women. There are some amazing statistics about how hard hit women-owned businesses, women-led businesses were in the pandemic. The challenges that women who also had childcare responsibilities and other family-related obligations, how hard hit they were. At the same time, there are statistics that show that the digital transformation and e-commerce and digital tools have provided tremendous opportunities for women in particular to emerge from the pandemic in a way that allows them to grow their businesses. And so our goal under Empower Asia is to actually increase the number of US women-owned businesses who are exporting to Asia, who learn about opportunities, get access to information, are able to establish relationships. And so we're in the midst of doing a bunch of targeted market research to figure out how effective our export tools are, the target markets that are of greatest interest, the types of assistance that people may want. And in the weeks ahead, we hope to be able to launch and engage more women-owned businesses in this effort. I will turn to Jennifer, just noting that our Export Assistance Network does span about 100 different cities throughout the United States. Jennifer is a part of our U.S. Export Assistance Center here in Detroit, but previously had worked in our UZIAC up in Pontiac as well. And so she will speak in greater detail about the resources and the services that we have available. The last thing I'll say is that we are in the midst of launching a webinar series that's focused on strategies for success in Asia. And so that webinar series will launch on June 1st, and my deputy, Eileen Mandy, will be on launching that webinar series and speaking about some of the opportunities that we see. So thank you again to the State Department, to Global Ties. I do apologize again that I'm going to have to be rushing off to prepare for the boss. But I hope you all understand, and it's a pleasure to be able to have this opportunity.
So, thank you.
Thank you.
Good morning, everybody. My name is Jennifer Lafredo, and I'm a Senior International Trade Specialist here in the Detroit UZIAC, or Export Assistance Center, or the Commercial Service. We are under a couple different names. It's a pleasure to be here. Just so everyone is aware, President Biden declared this week, May 21st through the 27th, as World Trade Week. And thanks to Marion and Global Ties for hosting this wonderful event this morning. I appreciate it. It's an honor to be here with Senior Official Murray, Special Representative Syed, and Deputy Assistant Secretary Phan. She did an excellent job kind of explaining who and what we are, so I don't know that I'm going to go through all of my points. But just so that you all are aware, we are here located in Detroit, and we do have another office in Pontiac as well on the west side in Grand Rapids. So locally, you are very well connected with our staff. We do have offices all over the U.S., and in the commercial sections at the State Department are our colleagues that we work with to help navigate and support U.S. companies to export to those markets. So we appreciate the relationship that we have with the State Department as well. So a few things just about our services. We help U.S. businesses through export counseling and education, market intelligence, business matchmaking, and commercial diplomacy. So if there is an issue where a company is having issues trying to penetrate a market in a wide variety of markets, please, we're here to help. And we do work quite a bit with our state representatives and also with SBA and Exxon. We're a very tight-knit community here in Michigan. We work very well together, and in any door, if you open any door, you will get to any one of us, and we can all assist you and point you into the right directions that you need to go to. Just a few things about the GDEI that Pam spoken about quite a bit. That is a major focus of our organization this year. We've always provided assistance to diverse-owned businesses, but with the increased, with this current administration, our efforts have been formalized and have been really more intentional in our effect and ability to reach out to this community. And a couple of the things that I wanted to reach and talk about is we have a couple of events that are happening right now, specifically designed to be for the GDEI groups. We have a global diversity trade mission to Africa with stops in South Africa and Ghana, and in addition, stop into Nigeria. It's taking place in August. Target industries are automotive, ICT, safety and security, and consumer goods, including food. So if somebody is manufacturing food, we can help with that. Another is, in the APEC economy, is the U.S. Commercial Service. Mexico is partnering with the National LGBT Chamber of Commerce and is currently recruiting for the 2023 LGBTQI+ trade mission to Mexico. And it is August 2nd through the 4th in Mexico City. Just another comment about Michigan exports. Michigan businesses exported $61.1 billion in goods in 2022, which is up from $55.5 billion in 2021, which is an upswing after a COVID dip in 2020, down to $44.4 billion, and surpassing the pre-COVID high in 2012, which was $59.9 billion. 4 out of Michigan's 5 top export markets are APEC economies: Canada, Mexico, China, and Korea. The 5th is Germany, which is an ally, obviously. $38 billion combined in Canada and Mexico accounted for 62% of Michigan merchandise exports in 2022. Again, we have an incredible ecosystem here in Michigan with all of our partners. And then any additional, I know that Pam briefly talked about the webinar series. It does start on June 1st, but it does go through November 2nd, and it is a 6-part series. So if you're interested in information on that, please let me know and I can get you the information. And again, I'm going to pass it on to open it up, I guess, for that.
Great, yes, exactly. So thank you so much to all of our speakers. Wonderful job. Now it's time to dive into some open discussion. So to you all, business leaders and stakeholders and community leaders, please feel free to share your questions, thoughts, comments with our speakers. Kindly, if you'd like, what we were thinking of, it was actually Sue's wonderful idea, Sue from the State Department, is to say, turn your name tag straight, if you'd like, to make it vertical, and that way we can find you, or you can raise your hand. And if you could kindly share your name and your organization, we'd be happy to hear your thoughts, comments, challenges, success stories. Anybody would like to start? Ed Clementi. It was a great idea from Sue.
Yeah, no. Sue's done a great job, by
Yeah.
the way, just so you guys know. We've been working with her for a while on this, and with Lou Finter, I should point out, from the U.S. Department of State as well. Just a couple things, because I was a former president of a Chamber of Commerce, a former state rep, and now I work at the MEDC. The biggest challenge I think we see at the MEDC somewhat is how do you grow your sort of innovation, creative economy somewhat, and I see small business obviously as being probably the best denominator to do that. And the big challenge obviously is investment first phase, sort of for businesses to get over the hump, but also I think that they're creating a middle class too. I think that's very important in Michigan. Obviously you've seen the governor talking about our population has been going down a little bit in the state. So for us, we want to figure out how to create wealth creation industries at the small business level, and obviously women and many of the underserved populations are like untapped. It seems like we haven't really delved into it, and I think this governor's trying to do it now. But anything you guys would have in the way to get VC dollars or whatever early stage that you're trying to do with small businesses, especially for the wealth creation. Michigan's famous for, you know, agriculture and manufacturing, and we make a lot of stuff here, physical stuff. So I think it's also a unique state, I think, in the United States too. Otherwise, that's all I have to say about it. Thank
Sure, thank you, Ed, for the question. I'm going to step back a little bit as I respond to your question about how to get resources in communities to invest in companies. When I talked about that we have this extraordinary moment in the world, what I didn't mention, which I wanted to wait till we have this open conversation, that our response as an administration has also been, quite frankly, pretty vigorous. When you look at last year and how that resource will flow down to all these communities, when you look at last year, the President passed historic legislation, the industrial policy, the likes of which we actually have not seen since the New Deal. And sometimes I know there's so much noise that even we as leaders in communities become numb to these numbers. But between the IRA and the CHIPS and Science Act and the infrastructure bill, we have passed industrial policy, the amount of resources which will benefit all communities, again, we haven't seen in decades. One stat I'll share with you, and then we'll come to your point. In the last 14 months, the United States attracted $205 billion worth of foreign investment for large-scale projects. A third of it came from foreign investors. For perspective, that number is 20 times the figure in 2019. How many of us know that? We need to internalize that number, and here is why. Because then you need to lean in and say, where is my share of those dollars? And we know at state, we actually working with the governors and mayors. We just hosted a big mayors summit in Denver. We're trying to make this connection. That's why we are here, thanks to Matt's leadership, to bring you all together. And I spent the entire day in Dearborn yesterday. We still need to do a much better job, frankly, to drive that awareness. So when you have a semiconductor fab being put up in upstate New York or in Columbus, Ohio, for the first time in 40 years by Intel and Micron, it will also create an ecosystem of software, AI, other suppliers that actually will literally build an entire community. I mean, I saw this happening in Silicon Valley when I was there, just the software 1.0, Web 2.0, and now AI. And there is no reason we cannot build that here, but we need to lean into those resources and make sure that you guys know what's going on. There is actually a serious amount of technical training money in the CHIPS and Science Act. There is other capacity building initiatives there. So I would really read up on all the legislation. The money is coming through the states, coming through the communities, and we just have to make sure that you all are aware of it and see how you can benefit from it. Of course, venture capital dollars will follow as well to augment some of that work, but know that we are making fertile investment at a level as a country we have not done in almost 70 years as a nation, and to build these industries of the future. I'll give you one example which might inspire even more action. I've been spending a lot of time domestically to drive awareness of all our good work across the government. And I was in Reno, Nevada. Outside Reno, we are now building, just outside Reno, we're building a lithium loop, what we call. So we are extracting lithium, processing it for batteries, lithium-ion batteries, delivering it to Tesla down not too far from that area for their batteries, EV makers, and then recycling it. Apparently the only place on planet Earth where this is happening within 300 miles of radius. And that's happening because IRA is giving $700 million to Northern Nevada. We're building an industry that just didn't exist. You can see another Silicon Valley of sorts emerge in the next 5 to 10 years. No reason can't happen here in Detroit area, in these communities. So anyways, that's just a quick response. I'm sure we all want to hear from you as to how much you know about these resources and what we can do to drive even greater awareness.
And I would just real quick, very briefly, I would just say from an APEC perspective, every approach to this has to be multi-layered, right? And so I think our layer on the APEC side is, what can we do with these other 20 economies to make sure that there's a good enabling environment and a level playing field across the region? So how can we make sure that in all of our communities, intellectual property rights are protected equally, that there's, good rules on cross-border data flows and digital trade and these kinds of things, because what we don't want to have is for our communities to be unfairly disadvantaged because communities in other parts of the Asia-Pacific region are doing it differently. And so getting together to have those kinds of discussions to establish a better enabling environment to try to make sure that there is a fair opportunity here and as elsewhere to drive investment in that direction, I think is important.
Yeah, one other thing I would add, I know trying to take Wafa's time, but we also had the second patent office in America was put here in Detroit because we have so many intellectual property lawyers, as well as a lot of engineers, obviously with the conglomeration of 3 R1 universities. So we do have a lot of that foundation already in place to figure out how to build on some of the things you're talking about. Yeah. Anyway, I just wanted to put that plug in.
Nobody likes lawyers, but everybody likes intellectual property.
I know, IPOs are
So-
very valuable.
And I just wanted to add, I know Mr. Syed indicated that about foreign direct investment. There's the Select USA Summit
Yeah.
that happens in May every year, and it's a great opportunity for organizations to learn about investment. There are people that are looking to invest that come to the Select USA event. So it's a place for people in the communities to go out to and look to try to be the place where these investments happen, so.
Yeah, and Pam and I co-hosted an event that was APEC specific at this year's Select USA Summit in May, and did some research ahead of time to put a number on it. It's $1.7 trillion in FDI stock that's come from the Asia Pacific region from the APEC economies.
I know Michigan had a very large presence.
Oh,
at
absolutely,
Select USA.
absolutely.
Thank you. Wafat Donaro, I am the Executive Director of the New Economy Initiative. We do small business support ecosystem building in Southeast Michigan. We are foundation funded, and we really, we seeded this organization that you're sitting in. We've brought in some venture capital to the region, and we've done a lot of work to do ecosystem building. And thank you all for being here. This is really the best place in the country. And because we do have the colleges, we are climate resilient, which nobody really talks about. We are one of very few places that are climate resilient. We have an incredible future ahead of us, but we have had population loss for the last 70 plus years. We also have the largest Arab-speaking community in the country, larger than New York, larger than LA. We have public schools that are Japanese immersion. We have a lot of resources that people don't know about and aren't being utilized. What is the State Department doing to maybe encourage incubation of foreign-based businesses in the U.S. in Detroit? And what else is, and how can we support that? And what else can be done to encourage relocation into Detroit to grow our region? Very small question.
Yes, everybody looks at me. I've got all the solutions here. So, let me.
Just as natural progression.
Very, very clever, Matt. Let me first of all say this. I spent some time yesterday with a lot of folks in Dearborn. That is one of our strengths, that we have this diaspora. And I think one of the things that we need to be even more aggressive in deploying is the diaspora community. They have natural affinity with regions, and this is true of the Asian American community, true of the Arab American community. I am an immigrant myself, and you have the familiarity with the culture, language, and networks. And again, we all know this, these are also communities of entrepreneurs. I mean, everybody came here for economic reasons, and they started a business. And we at State actually, we do leverage diaspora. We have an office, Global Partnerships, that we work with very closely, Matt and I, and we can certainly make sure that these communities are parts of delegation. And I'm sure Commerce will do the same thing, through our Jennifer can help insist that. But again, I keep saying this again and again, folks don't know about these opportunities. By the way, yesterday I asked a question in the room full of Dearborn, how many of you have heard of Select USA? Not a single hand went up. And these were folks who are civically engaged. That's where we bring the world to invest in us. And we have state level delegations, community delegations. So just to build on earlier comments, I would highly recommend that not just at the state level, but even at county level, you can consider creating a delegation and go and speak and say, look, hey, I want to invite some companies to relocate here. We bring startups to Select USA as well, and our states and counties can, if you will, show off the region and say, look, come here, we've got all this talent. So there are those resources, and this is again why we are here to help hopefully close the information gap so that you know that you can attract folks. The other thing that I would say is, and this is not necessarily a State Department topic, it's a broader topic, is the talent on talent. One of the critical ingredients, and I'm saying this as someone who was a CEO not too long ago, without people and skills, it's very hard to build an ecosystem. So I think that's an area where we need to collectively put our head together and happy to chat offline as to how do we ensure that you have software engineers and AI engineers and ML engineers and creative content creators in our communities. And again, if you don't have a 4-year degree program, how can we do vocational? There is some money in CHIPS and Science Act to drive some of that investment in talent. But that's pretty critical because people are going to come here because they can scale a unicorn, right? And they can find talent. You're right, you have universities, and we want to make sure the talent stays here. But please know there are these resources. The other thing that we can also offer is our ambassadors do this, what we call direct line webinars, when they project opportunities in host nations or partner nations. We want to make sure that you all are getting information on these ambassador talks that we beam all the time for you to build connectivity with our various partners. Matt, you can add more.
I think, again, speaking from the perspective of APEC as well, like we were so excited to be able to host APEC this year, in part because we knew we would have an opportunity to showcase some key communities around our country, right? And this doesn't come along very often. Last time I hosted was 2011. So you have these visitors from these 20 economies coming in from around the region. And when we started talking about it, a lot of times I think when people think of APEC, they think of the West Coast, right? So yes, we're going to have meetings in California, and we're going to have meetings in, there's a meeting coming up in Seattle. But for our team, we were like, look, this can't just be about the West Coast. This also has to be about the center of the country. Let's come up with a list, of cities that, have demonstrated innovation, resiliency, sustainability, all the things that we're trying to do in APEC, and what would be a good backdrop for these meetings. And of course, Detroit was at the top of a very short list, right? And so we were so, delighted and honored that it was able to be possible during these couple of weeks. So just over these last couple of weeks, just to think about some of the things that have happened, we had transportation ministers from all 21 economies that came into Detroit. All of them eyes wide open for the opportunities here, right? So with their delegations, we had a great event that Secretary Buttigieg hosted on green maritime corridors right by the St. Lawrence River. He had a great event talking about EV minority financing with civic leaders from around Detroit. Then we had the actual meetings themselves, and we went through some of these. We went over to GM and saw some of the technologies that they're working on the auto side. As Pam mentioned, there was an auto dialogue later in the week that the Department of Commerce co-hosted. And then we've got trade ministers coming in, and I've heard so many. I was with the trade ministers last night and heard so many of them basically saying, we had no idea that this was Detroit. We're gonna be back, right? So even if in that small way we've been able to sort of make, be successful and sort of open some doors that weren't open before maybe, I think we're really proud of that, and we, but we also know too, there are other communities around the country that are similar to Detroit. They may not be as good as Detroit, right? But there's other communities around the country, and so Sue on our team has set up this APEC Connect, program, so that throughout the year, we're not just going out to communities where we're hosting APEC meetings, but we're also being proactive about going out to communities to talk about, these opportunities that we have with the other 20 economies. So we've been to Pittsburgh, we've been to Atlanta, we've been to Rockville, Maryland. We're going to continue to do that throughout the year, because each, there's so many different places that have a story to tell, and we want to help tell that story, right? So that's really, I think, one of the goals that we are very passionate about when it comes to the APEC opportunity, particularly hosting in the United States.
I don't know that I have anything else to add.
Chris has.
Chris?
Hey, thank you. My name is Chris McClain. I'm with the Michigan Economic Development Corporation. I do business development, and one, I'd like to welcome you and thank you so much for being here in Detroit. I was born in Detroit, and talking about narrative, the idea that the Detroit that I was born into would host APEC. I'm a nerd and know what that means, but I was like, what? It's very cool. So thank you for changing attitudes, changing minds about Rust Belt, Midwest, majority black city, all of that. What I did want to ask is that you guys are in time to negotiate this, Indo-Pacific economic framework, and particularly, the gains and things that will be made from that exchange. How do we get people who don't know what this is, people from the community, I work with, businesses and exporters and things like that. How do we get them engaged in following the progress that is made from these talks that are held here in Detroit?
Okay. Well, I'll take that one first because I don't want Dilawar to
Yeah.
get mad at me. So, look, I think one of the things that the administration is very intent on, and I think it was great that Pam talked about this, is we can't just have like one mechanism to engage this part of the world, right? The Indo-Pacific, the Asia-Pacific, it's way too important to just have it be about APEC or to just have it be about, a dialogue with Japan or whatever, right? You need to have other platforms. And so the president launched the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework talks last May, and a lot of the goals are similar with a lot of other things that we're doing, including APEC. Like you want better digital trade, you want better supply chain connectivity, we want to be, we want to advance decarbonization, we want to have good, policies on anti-corruption and tax. We want to have, again, for this enabling environment, the level playing field, right? So, the Indo-Pacific Economic Framework, what it's trying to do is with a set of partners, 12 of whom are APEC members, 2 are not, India and Fiji, trying to drill down even a little bit further and say, okay, what are some specific commitments that we can, that can be made here? And I think that there's been, some stakeholder outreach, for IPEF. I expect that as the negotiations, because it's still a live negotiation, I expect as the negotiations go on, our friends at the Department of Commerce and U.S. Trade Representative are going to do even more stakeholder engagement so that you can have the uptake from companies. And so that's on the IPEF side. So as Pam said, Secretary Raimondo's coming in. They're going to continue with those discussions tonight into Saturday because it's a great opportunity to go back to back with the APEC piece. And then on APEC, we know that we have a calendar of engagements that's very predictable. It's not a live negotiation in the same way IPEF is, right? So you can then, we can do stakeholder engagement all along the way. And one of our key messages for this APEC year is that APEC historically over the last 30 years has been a good place where you can highlight public-private collaboration. But we feel like because of COVID, a lot of that fell off in the last 3, 4, 5 years, right? So we really want to revitalize that piece of it. So throughout our entire host year, we're running workshops with SMEs, we're doing events like this, we're getting into specific policy discussions on things like food security and women in the economy and science, technology, innovation, where we bring the private sector in. Yesterday, there was a fantastic event that USTR Ambassador Tai hosted with Detroit-based SMEs to talk about some of their challenges, like with all the ministers there, which was great. The day before, there was a great event to talk about supply chain connectivity with the private sector in the room, and we had UPS and Johnson & Johnson there, and reps from around the region. And so we want to be very intentional about that piece with APEC too. So our hope is that these things can be complementary. We've got the APEC stuff going on that I'm helping to coordinate, and then the IPEF stuff that Commerce and USTR are leading on. And what's very cool is that it's all come together in Detroit this week, so that you've got first the trade ministers for APEC, and then you've got the IPEF ministers right, back to back. So, when you talk about World Trade Week, y'all are at the center of it this week when it comes to that. So, yeah. So I hope that answers the question.
If I can come at it from a different perspective, when you look at all the great work that's happening with respect to our negotiations, they're designed to take friction out of our ability to trade and our ability to export. But I think it should be not news to anybody. You can still do business with Asia, and we have a very large trading relationship with APEC countries. Yes, on IP and cross-border data flow and many other areas we can improve, and I advocate for business environment everywhere I go. That's the first thing. But one thing that I like to remind all of us is that there needs to be more energy on part of our business community to export. I ask for feedback when I travel around the world to our counterparts. Hey, what can we do more or differently and better? I'm trained to do that as a business guy because we don't have everything figured out all the time. And I hear this consistently, and you're all a group of leaders here, so I'm just going to be very direct. And I literally have heard that word. Your private sector can be more aggressive. They need to show up. And I've heard this from Algeria, I've heard this in South America, I've heard this in Asia Pac. And guess what? When we don't show up, who's showing up?
China.
And also some of our best friends. In Africa, it's Turkey, and it's Germany, and it's France. So the reason why I'm saying that is that there is this somehow notion that somehow we can't do business. No, we obviously can help you do better business, take some friction out. But first step is to actually show up. So Chris, you all have also a responsibility to make sure that your ecosystem, you encourage people to think global early, take bets. You know, I've run startups. Sometimes a startup can actually do a hustle in a small market and provide a solution that may not be of interest to a large company which has 20 deals before they get to the small deals. And that's part of the reason why we are not showing up. Because some of these opportunities in places like, I'll give you an example, Bangladesh, right, which just recently we put an FCS, is now a major emerging market. It's still considered too small for larger companies, but it can be a terrific market for many of our small medium businesses, our exporters. And so I keep encouraging that we have to, in our model, one of our most important force is our private sector. Market-oriented enterprise that we have inspired the world with and done so much good. And the next generation of those folks have to make those bets, go out there. Yes, there was COVID, but the world is back open, build relationships. And I'll tell you why it's even more important now, because the other guys are doing it way more aggressively than they were before. They've taken our playbook and giving a run to us. And you know, we know how to hustle, and we have to do it. And again, we have this relationship, we have diaspora, we have platforms like these. In this community, I mean, you look at, you know, just the diversity. So one of the things I would request is also more intersectionality within your own organizations, you know, with the APEC community and the Arab American community and the African American community. So I just want to add that perspective that I hope you're not waiting for some of these negotiations to pan through. They will continue. We always, you know, work at it. But there's huge opportunity, and we see this in country after country. And most of these folks actually prefer to do business with us. I mean, we hear this feedback all the time, that we would rather do business with an American company, but they gotta be here. They can't run this from an HQ in a region, because these are major markets. So I just want to add that perspective.
I'm going to just add a few things. Obviously, especially here in Detroit, trade agreements are quite important. We recognize the importance of them because of the relationship with the automotive industry, and so obviously we still need to be engaged in that. But I think your point that the small exporters are not really engaged is the biggest challenge. To kind of put a point on that, companies, and the reasons why it is so important, companies that export grow faster and are 8.5% less likely to go out of business. So again, this is really to keep people engaged and alive. And obviously COVID was one of those options and things that happened where we lost so many companies. And less than 5% of US small, medium-sized exporters export, and of those that do, 58% of them are only exporting to one market. If they're only exporting one place, yes, they've gotten their taste of it and they understand it a little bit, but they need to move on. They need to find those places that are a little bit more uncomfortable to go and show up, as you've indicated so eloquently.
And we'll be there as well.
Yeah, absolutely. And I don't know that everybody knows what FCS is, Foreign Commercial Service. So that's our offices in Bangladesh, and it is new. It's very new.
Very new.
Grace.
Hi, I'm Grace Lee. I'm the Chair Emeritus for the Asian Pacific American Chamber of Commerce. But I have a question, so maybe a request. Based on my entrepreneur experience, I have another company called Logic Solutions. We do software development software. And one of our products is for the environmental health and safety. And we have been working in China and Taiwan, help them to comply with the international client issues. The problem for us is they are interested, but then collection is a challenge. So we reach out to the export and import bank, you know, for the funding, for the payment. But because it's software, it's not tangible. The export and import bank has been kind of reluctant to, you know, funding the receivables, you know, for their collections. And I think as we kind of go more on the technology side, and that kind of in how, because the United States we have more advancement in that kind of products and service, you know, the services, maybe we can look at the policy to see how we can maybe funding that intangible for the Export-Import Bank.
Grace, have you spoken with SBA, Romy?
No, because they just say go to the Export-Import Bank.
No, you should speak to Romy as well.
Okay.
I will make sure you get
Oh, I
connected to
know
him.
him, I know him.
Yeah, because
Yeah.
he should be able, because they do the same sort of work on the receivables as well. And they may be a little bit more comfortable with the IT software.
Yeah, with the company overseas?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah. So that is my request.
Mr. Kumar?
Good morning. My name is Anand Kumar. I'm the founder president of miindia.com. It's a digital platform for the Indian community in Michigan, and it's been around 23 years, 5 years ahead of Facebook and same year as Google. And we offer pretty much the same services. So when I woke up this morning, I thought that I knew it all. I had a long resume of corporate leadership, community engagement, and a lot of connections. But after I got here, I found out that my bubble burst. I did not know about APEC. And that's a problem. And I'm gonna add on to what Mr. Syed said, awareness. Awareness is 90% of success. If you have a great idea, but you don't know where to go or who to talk to, it's not gonna help much at all. And with a lot of innovation happening in Michigan, in Detroit, with AI, and our folks are in the healthcare, automotive, information technology, it's a great opportunity. The world has changed in the last 2 months, and many of you would agree with ChatGPT. It is real. Things are going to change. It's a great opportunity for innovation crossing borders. The question is, how can a media platform play a bigger role with what the good work you folks are doing? And it also, we need to stress that it needs to be sustainable. Great news today, if it's not repeated tomorrow and the day after, not many people are gonna find about it. So my ask is, how can we work with you to get the word out every day? Because there's news every day.
So, Anand, if I may,
please.
look, when I joined government, one of the things that struck me was, and I'll use the word they use in sales, it has an inbound model. Folks expected that people know where we are, and they will just reach out to us, and when they reach out to us, we'll do something for them. That's generally and I'm really broadening it, with all due respect to everybody. And I have a serious issue with that, because the country has changed. This is what the country looks like. People don't even know that I exist. They don't even know who to call. And there are only 10 companies that know that. But how do I enable the next generation of those 10 companies that today is a black-owned firm, or a women-owned firm, or an Indian-American-owned firm, or an API-owned firm? They don't know that the CBA office, who does all this good work and all these things that we're talking about. I've gone to communities, they don't even know, frankly, that we have resources in districts. So we have to change the model. It's outbound, to get out there. So I've been doing commercial diplomacy USA tour, which is unintuitive, because nobody knows. There's great work. We're putting resources, and amazing resources. Again, smartest people, mission driven. So what's happened is there's a generational shift now. We got to get out. The country has changed, especially after COVID. Even whatever engagements we had, they broke down. I've met with folks in the economic development offices. They no longer receive our emails anymore, because for 3 years something happened. Like people don't get our checkline emails anymore, because they're like, oh, we just had a system change. So there is an attempt, and you're seeing this. That's why we are here. That's why Matt is here. We brought these multilateral forums and platforms to these communities, and we're going to keep doing it. And by the way, we didn't talk about other, obviously, APEC is taking all the focus there. But we've hosted Africa Leaders Summit in the past 1 year. We hosted Summit of the Americas for South and Central America, City Summit in Denver, and we are literally picking communities that often don't hear from our global partners. So I just want to reiterate, that's our model. We want to get out there. How you can help is to help us amplify this. simple thing, Matt said, LinkedIn page for APEC, everyone should follow that. And please share it in your networks. It's just one click to repost it. We all know that. Collectively here, we probably have 500,000 people in the networks. It's that simple. People don't even come to websites anymore. We got to reach to them. And so it is, again, it's all about sharing information. Resources are there. And by the way, if we run into a situation where there's a lot of inbound, you know, it's a good problem to have. We'll solve that. We will go and make requests for resources. And everyone wants to help our communities. The challenge is, again, people just don't know. So we need your help. You're the nodes in communities. You know, you're trusted leaders. You yourself are success stories. And we genuinely want to reach out. As I mentioned, there is just so much opportunity right now in the world in response to all the challenges we have seen, whether it's war in Ukraine, climate issues, and you know, the recovery that we see globally. So the solutions have to come from these communities and small businesses. So I know I'm repeating myself, but please help us amplify it. That's one simple thing that I think you can do, and also keep that you know, channel open with feedback, so that we can hear from you and inform policy and engagement going forward.
If I could just, if you'll permit me a quick story, Anand, on the, you know, my bubble bursts every single time that I go travel domestically, right? Because I realize there's so much great stuff happening that I don't really know about. And I'll just say that I'm going to be very blunt. I'm a career State Department Foreign Service officer. I started my career with 2 years at our embassy in New Delhi, and then I went 2 years to our embassy in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. Then I had the crazy idea that I wanted to learn Mandarin Chinese, so I went to our embassy in Beijing, and I went to our consulate in Shanghai. And then after 13 years as a diplomat in these 4 postings, they pulled me back to Washington and had me working for an undersecretary on economic affairs. And so one of the things you're supposed to do in those positions is you're supposed to staff the boss when, you know, he or she goes out on travel. So, but I was the Asia Pacific person, so I was pretty excited, right? Like I was pretty jazzed up because we're gonna get to go back to Shanghai, or we're gonna go to Tokyo, or we're gonna go to Bangkok, these places that I've been before, and where I feel pretty comfortable, and I know I can work with the embassy there, and you know, everything. And so the first trip comes up, and the boss is like, well, there's this APEC event, because it was our APEC Coast Year 2011, there's this APEC event in San Francisco, and then I want to pop down to LA and do some events there. I was terrified. I'd never been to California, right? Like I didn't know anything about San Francisco. I didn't know anything about Los Angeles. I actually ended up reaching out to friends that worked for commerce in Shanghai to connect me with the city of Los Angeles office in Shanghai so that they could connect me with Los Angeles, right? So I tell that story to say that we are historically very bad at this at the State Department, right? It is not in our DNA necessarily. We train people to go out to the world and work in our embassies and work in our consulates. And so, again, I think one of the things that I'm very passionate about and take very personally is I want to use this APEC Coast Year to do more, to get out domestically. But every single time I do, I learn something. You know, I learn a lot, and our team learns a lot. And what we need to do, and I think our challenge, you know, obviously right now we're very focused on November leaders meeting, the president will be there, it'll be a big deal, whatever. But we're also constantly thinking about how do we do this better going forward? Because this has been eye-opening for us too. Every single trip I take in the United States, my bubble gets burst. And I want us to do this better. And I think our team collectively, under Secretary Blinken's leadership and across the board in the department, they want to do this better. But we have some catching up to do.
If I could just make one point, I know Catherine has a question. You know, one thing that, you know, President, you've heard President Biden say this very often, that he wants the administration to look like America. And there's a reason for that. It's not just that we want to make sure there is representation for this, but it's because people come from communities and they see those communities. It is crucial. Representation matters. I am partly showing up because I am from this community, if you will, right? And that we see in every second person who comes from backgrounds that we often don't see represented at the highest level in the government. So one of the asks I have is also to have your folks consider pursuing a career in foreign service in the State Department. You know, we need these departments, the next generation of leaders who will get to sit in Matt's role to come from all backgrounds, right? And that's something, again, you know, the Secretary is very big on. We go recruit all the time. And I'll even say join ITA, our colleagues. We're not being competitive with commerce. We need more folks. And again, you know, I've seen that, we used to go recruit and actively, and there is now an aggressive attempt, but we've seen lack of sort of engagement from campuses on foreign service, and so we make that pitch everywhere. You can just go to Department of State/Courier, share that with your folks. Again, Commerce, I'm sure, have their website, because you need the next generation of officers coming from all our communities.
We've got, it looks like about 4 more questions to.
That guy down there has been there for a
Oh, okay,
while.
sorry. We'll have, I see 4 questions, maybe 5 going, so we'll try to get to all of them. Mr. Naju?
So Christopher Naidoo, I'm the CEO of a global automotive manufacturing company. So I have 2 questions, one regarding carbon neutrality, the other one on immigration. So our customers are starting to mandate that we have a carbon neutral policy in place, and we're gonna hit those targets by a certain date. A lot of our manufacturing is in the APEC regions. And so I'd like to comment on the willingness, readiness, financing ability to meet those requirements. What are you guys seeing from your end? And is there ever going to be a time when the US is going to, through the use of tariffs, are going to say, okay, you cannot manufacture in a certain region because they don't have a carbon neutral policy? So we want to be prepared for that. The second question is on immigration. As you've heard from around the room, finding talent is very, very difficult. And obviously, the H-1B visa for a number of years was, provided us with access to talent that we couldn't otherwise find locally. Are there any talks in place about relaxing that, increasing the quotas on that? I know that things have changed since some of the tech companies have had a number of layoffs, but for smaller companies in the Midwest, it's hard to actually get on that quota and to get access to those H-1B visas. So that's a comment to that.
Sure. I think on the carbon neutrality, I'm glad you raised it. It is I think a really high priority right now for APEC. And one of the things that when I started in this job about 15 months ago, that I was very surprised by, because I had worked on APEC in 2011, 2012, and then I had gone and done other things, and then I came back. Back then, 11, 12 years ago, there was no discussion about climate or carbon neutrality. There was some discussion around sustainability and green growth, but it wasn't that well developed. When I came back to it this last year, every single economy, even some of our biggest competitors in the region, are all talking about the need to go towards carbon neutrality, and the need to really focus on addressing the climate crisis and on really focusing on broadening out sustainability across all of what APEC's work streams. And so Thailand hosted APEC last year. They did a great job in advancing a new policy initiative in which they really focused on sustainability and carbon neutrality. So I think what I see in APEC, I'm relatively optimistic that we're all driving towards the same direction, but there are some important, I think, differences and challenges, right? I think the one that we've heard for a long time, anytime it comes to climate issues, is developing countries versus developed countries, or developing economies versus developed. So you still have some of that to work out. I think there's also the question of, well, APEC is not a climate negotiating body, but what are the things that APEC can do to help support what our climate negotiators are trying to do through the COP process and the UNFCCC process, right? And I think that, again, I'm optimistic that we're going in the right direction. There are still some potential obstacles ahead, but I don't want to speculate on whether or not there will be a need for tariffs or anything like that. But the other thing too is with IPEF that Pam talked about, there's a specific decarbonization pillar as well, where we're drilling down on even more granular agreements with those other 13 partners on what we're going to do on decarbonization and decarbonizing supply chains and all of that kind of thing. So I've been very, very pleasantly surprised with the direction these things are going, but we still have a lot of work to do. And I think that's also why organizations like APEC and opportunities like IPEF and others are also good good opportunities to advance that kind of work. On the immigration question, I apologize, I don't have an answer on that one, but I can take that back and we can try to get a better answer for you. But,
I would just add one thing on the immigration front. Again, the President has been very clear that we need to solve it in a comprehensive way. And we've been talking about a comprehensive immigration reform for some time, and which we have not. So it's not just about the skilled labor visa issue, which I'm aware is, and I've experienced that. It's not right now working, and it's not optimal. But that in our system, we have to work with Congress, and you all have a role to play here to let your concerns be known to your representative, and let them know, right, that this is a challenge we have, because we need this energy across the branches of government to solve the challenge. I mean, there's a migration challenge in south of the border that we are obviously working on. Then of course labor challenges as well. But the position of the administration is that we have to solve it in a comprehensive way, and for that, all parties have to come together. And again, as business leaders, as community leaders, you all have a role to play here. That's all I can say as a public official on this important topic.
I know we have still a number of questions, so it looks like Ms. Saad is next, and then we'll have Leslie and Dr. and Elizabeth.
Thank you. My name is Tahar Syed. I am the Interim Executive Director for the Arab American Women's Business Council. And I'm really glad to be in this room to hear the great questions and all of the feedback that you have. So I appreciate it. We're talking a lot, the focus is on women, economic development, and empowerment. When we talk about that, it's an interconnected issue. It's not simply about getting them the resources they need financially. It is, briefly mentioned, childcare. It is very much the not being able to afford or access quality childcare. It's parental leave. It's not being able to take the time off they need to heal after having kids. And I ran into someone that was working at Target once, and she just looked very physically in pain and discomfortable. I said, "Hey, are you okay?" She's like, "Yeah, I'm okay. I had twins 8 weeks ago, and I couldn't support myself, and I had to come back to work." She physically wasn't even able to go back to work, but she had no other option because she had no other way to support herself and these 2 babies. So when you talk about women's economic development and empowerment, it's very interconnected and it's a very systemic issue. And the women that own, specifically with minorities, they own very small businesses. They don't even qualify for a lot of the resources that are out there. They're solopreneurs, they're micropreneurs, they're working out of their homes. So while their financial contribution to the economy might be very insignificant in general, it's extremely significant to them and their families. And it's what's keeping them out of poverty. It's what's helping them raise them to the middle class, taking care of their families. So I say all that to say, organizations like ours that work with minority women, we would love to get them to the point where they can trade globally and they can start to, because that could make a huge difference to themselves, and then we can start making more significant impact. But in order to get them to there are so many barriers that we have to break and we have to go through in order to get to that point. So what can organizations like mine do to let them know what resources are available for them, the very small businesses that typically don't qualify, but also how can we skill them? What do we need to do in order to empower them? What resources can we get them? What skills do they need? How can we create programs that will get them to the point where they can trade globally?
Well, first of all, thank you for what you do, and thanks for sharing that. Government is one actor, and as you just heard, we have one area that we look at, and you just very well articulated it. There is a lot of interconnected issues here, and necessarily Brad and I cannot necessarily speak to all of them, but your role as leaders and those who have roots in the community and with your incredible heart, you're serving these folks, it's incredible. So thank you, if I may say, on behalf of all of us who work on these issues, but you're dealing with some really elemental challenges here. I think Pam mentioned about some of the child care. I am not necessarily an expert on what those programs are, that commerce. There's also initiatives that Michigan has rolled out, broadly speaking. I would get up to speed on those. I'm sure you may be familiar with. But then you can also share with us some of the feedback you have. That's one thing I want to reiterate. You all can always reach out to us with your suggestions. There's inbound is fine, And we often take that and share it with our colleagues. And actually, we want to hear from it. Hear from you all. In fact, there's one thing we can do from this conversation is to build these connections, because we need to hear those stories. And this administration, the president, the vice president, they are, in our Secretary of Commerce, our own Secretary Blinken, I mean, they're very, they all have families, they have seen issues, and again, they came into office after the country's been recovering through a difficult pandemic where we saw impact on women, it's disproportionate impact, especially women of color. So they're alive to that. But as a policy, sometimes maybe it doesn't reach everyone. So we need to understand those gaps and bring them forth. Again, the resources are there. It's how do we steer them in places where they're not reaching in a way that's scalable. So that's all I can say. I wish I had a better answer for you. But what I would just say is please tell the story. Please share these experiences. At the same time, keep inspiring these women to consider one day be able to trade, because you've got to dream as well, right, and see how you get there. And just even in this room, the resources that you have as just your own brother and sister in this community, I mean, you can help each other. So I'll give you my card, and we'll love to keep in touch, and I'll see if I can find something that can point to you, which is hopefully more helpful than my suggestions right now.
And in APEC, just briefly, I mean, look, I'm not going to pretend that international multilateral organization is going to solve all those problems, because you're talking about, again, a very cross-cutting, challenging problem, right? So I will say that one of the things I'm very proud of is that before 2011, our region, our Asia Pacific region, didn't have a coordinated way to talk about some of these issues related to women's economic empowerment. And then it was due to then Secretary of State Hillary Clinton's leadership that she raised the issue in APEC during our host year, and that created some institutions that did a couple of very important things across the region. One thing it did was it raised awareness of the problem, right? Because number one, you've got a problem obviously for women and the women in these economies and in these communities. But you also have a problem for the productivity in these economies that are leaving out half of their population, right? And that's a really important problem as well. One of our partners in APEC, Korea, is a very advanced economy in a lot of different ways, but they rank last in the developed world for women's economic participation. And so continuing to have discussions about why this matters both for women and for families, but also for economies writ large, I think is important. The other thing APEC has been successful at doing is starting to create, albeit slowly, it takes time, but creating networks of women entrepreneurs from around the region. Because a lot of times what we find is when we bring together women-run small businesses from the Philippines with, say, women-run small businesses from the United States or from Peru, the stories are very similar, the challenges are very similar, and we've seen successes where they've also been able to network together to try to work together to resolve some of these challenges. But I'll say a third thing, which is really important to your point, something we're trying to work on this year, is women's economic empowerment in the APEC context is not just a siloed thing. It's not just like one event where you talk about women's economic empowerment and then you celebrate that and then you leave. It has to be cross-cutting across everything. So when our health ministers get together in August, there absolutely 100% has to be a discussion and some engagement on the care economy, right? And when our SME ministers get together in August, there absolutely has to be a discussion and a focus on women-run SMEs and their inability at times to access supply chains. And when we talk about food security in August, there has to be a discussion around how that's impacting women in all of these economies, right? And similarly, there's a lot of focus right now on the gender-climate nexus and how, in a lot of cases, climate change is really causing situations that can wipe out women-run businesses and everything. And then, of course, our finance ministers are going to get together, and you got to have a discussion there about access to capital and things like that. So, again, I'm not going to pretend at all that this is going to solve all the problems, but it is a tremendous focus for us, and it's something that I think we should be proud of as the United States, and that we helped launch this work in this organization. But we have so much work still to do. I have to leave in a few minutes, but go ahead.
If you can just stay for two more
Yeah,
quick
sure,
questions.
sure.
Kathleen.
Okay. My name is Catherine Lee. My company, I have several companies, but the one I'm talking about is Health Secrets USA. If I'm sitting here listening to all the connection I could have had, can figure it in there now instead. You know, if I knew all of you, you are such a treasure, but you're waiting in the dark. Nobody knows you guys are there. So how can we, the average people, you know, entrepreneur, small business, especially small business women, business, we are hardworking people. We are innovative. We want to make a difference in our community. But all my life, I have been a businesswoman, but I struggle everything on my own because I didn't know government has all the resources that we could tap into. So how is it possible for the government give more funding to local, have more local offices to help? Because, you know, I can see 4, 5 people I can connect with, but we need more offices so that more people know about the resources or help that they can get to. So, I mean, we have done our part. I travel all over the world for my business. And I could have just tapped into you guys, you know?
It's great now you know.
So I just wanted to say that also, how can we make Michigan a state that young people will want to come back? I hear all these comments about it. And for my selfish reason, my son came back from New York. He graduated from U of M, but they left, went to New York. And the only reason he came back was because of the pandemic. And he wants his daughter to be born in Michigan, a safer environment. So now he's still here. How can we keep those young people here? Because young people are our future. Now he is also very innovative in his own business. He is in AI for the food business. So it's a very unique and innovative idea that he has. So that's why I'm going to tap into you. Those are all the things that I know that you cannot have a quick result. But I know that now I can work with all of you.
If I could just really quickly, I really apologize. I have to go because they're doing statement negotiations on our final trade ministerial statement, so I do have to run. I did want to just say, it's been a real honor to be here, and I really appreciate all the insights and all the input. And again, every single time I come to one of these events, I'm always blown away by just the network, the innovation, everything that's happening. And believe me, we then take all of this into the rooms when we go and have these meetings. And we want to make sure, my own family, my grandfather was a coal miner, my dad worked very hard to put himself through college. Like, I always want to think about these, the communities when we're going out and doing our work. So I really do value, the input today, and I do apologize I have to leave. So I'm going to leave you in Dilawar and Jennifer's capable hands, but thank you so much.
Thank you.
Senior
Thank you.
Catherine, I'll say this with a little bit of think of it as a grain of salt. We in commercial service know that we are the best kept secret in government, unfortunately. And we recognize that, but we also recognize that we don't have an effective way of getting the information about who and what we are out to the public. We have fought with that for years, and I apologize, and that's really all I can say about that. We have done many projects where we are trying to be more proactive and get the information about all the great work that we do, and the states and SBA, and because we all do work together quite well, and we are very good at what we do. Michigan is a little bit different because there are some really great collaborations that do happen, especially with the state. So we are really good in some ways in getting that information out. There are, going back to women, there are a couple of programs that are not just Michigan-based and not just commerce-based, but like the Goldman Sachs 10,000 Business project, where there are places that people can go to try to get information and assistance rather than just specifically for exporting. We do offer export tech, which is kind of a mini set up your business, understand your export program, and how you're going to proceed in exporting in the future. So there are lots of opportunities and places for people to go. And again, I think it is a bit of a challenge that we all do, and you've indicated quite a bit as well, that we don't necessarily, it is hard for all of you to know who and what we are, and that we're here to help you.
And if let me just thank you for sharing this, and I appreciate your candor. Look, there's a systemic challenge here.
Mm-hmm.
You know, systemic challenge is that the communities have changed. Look at the community. This is probably not what the community looked like in this room and a similar group of stakeholders 20 years ago, 10 years ago. And we have to reflect that in government. And that because, again, in part because they would know how to engage with this community, right? And so it's on both sides, right? And that's the transition we've started the last 2 years ago. Like we are still in the midst of it. It's not by any means done. But we also need, folks to consider careers in service, to actually represent them and their communities and their aspirations in these roles that we have. But you need to keep sharing this feedback and hold everyone's feet to fire. And I am, as you've heard, I've been pretty candid about this. I have blazed a new trail by first leaving my professional career, jumping into public service full time. I'm a tech entrepreneur. This is new for me. But you need operating DNA in government. You need people who have built companies so I can understand what you're talking about. My last company was AI Healthcare, backed by blue chip VCs. I left that to serve the country because when you talk about AI and policy and ChatGPT, I know what that means. It's not just a talking point on a paper. We need that, and so it's going to take all of us, right? And you need to augment our capacity. I mean, the world is changing, the technology is changing, the challenges in the world are literally once in a generation, and we don't have the capacity yet in government. And by the way, it's a challenge all over the world, but it's more so done in the United States, given our scale and our diversity. So it is, I put the onus on both sides here, right? All of us, we are all in this together. So, we need your help, we need your partnership. We are trying to re-engineer some of the things. Like I have inverted the model from inbound to outbound. I'm aggressively getting out in communities. Just having been to 7 cities in the last 2 months, I have met 3,000 people like yourself. And it's good to put a stress on the system, because only then we will change and we will say, okay, we need more resources, we need more Jennifers in these communities, right? We are hearing from our folks. And so it is an exciting time, but it's also a good problem to have that we need to solve this challenge. And hopefully we can make some improvements there, but appreciate what you're saying. And again, we can communicate more effectively and proactively, but you can also organize. You can also come together. One of the best things the government get to do is convene. We are good at convening. You all showed up thanks to Global Ties because we all were here, but you can keep coming back together as a group and organize, because again, there's so much collective networks and resources in this room as well.
May I just make one more
Please.
comment? All of us small business people here, maybe each one of us can be the representation of you guys and go out there in a grassroots. That's the best part. Best way to reach everybody, right?
Absolutely.
Would everybody agree to do that? That would be a good start.
Right.
I think there are just a couple more questions. I don't know if we can keep you longer. I know we wanted some.
I can be here for another 10 minutes, right, Aaron?
And I know we're
Am I
also
good?
going to get some time.
Okay.
for networking.
Thank you.
So we had a couple more questions. Yes. And then Jenny will.
Sure.
Thank you so much. Hello, my name is Mai Song. I'm a county commissioner, but first and foremost, I am a mom of 4 children under 10. And I'm sorry that I was late today, but just so you know, I had to make prior arrangements with my 4-year-old in order to be here, as well as to drop off my kids earlier to school today. So I want to thank Tahrana for bringing up these issues about women, and I'm in tears because I am a solopreneur. And part of the reason why I started my business was because I could not keep a job and afford child care. And so I forged my own path as a small business owner. The pandemic really crippled my business, and we are still trying to recover from that. I just want to say that I believe the solution is that we invest in child care. You talked about the Science and Chips Act. I think we need a Child Care Act. As a developed country, we only spend $500 per child. Compared to Denmark, they spend over $25,000 on children under 2 years old. So I am here to implore you to please support our children because they are our future. And we need more resources. Thank you.
So thank you, first of all, for sharing, and thank you for being here. That's what the president is fighting every single day. Let me repeat that. Your stories, ma'am, is why the President Biden is fighting every single day. I wish I could speak on behalf of the entire federal government and all the programs. Obviously, in my perspective, it's on the foreign policy side and commercial diplomacy side. But we have to meet you there, right? When we talk about foreign policy, it's for policy of the middle class. It's for people like yourself. It's for entrepreneurs like yourself, moms like yourself. And we need your help to make sure that we continue to move the country forward. Again, when we talk about the word equity, I know that's everyone talks about equity, but this is what equity means. And honestly, I wish I could just beam the story to say, look, this is what equity is. That's why we are fighting for it. And we are trying to bring these amazing 21 nation economy platforms to places like Detroit to actually hear your stories, to actually connect with you and why it matters to you. And maybe because of that, we're going to be able to open new opportunities and hold all of our feet to fire, to do more, to do better, to go broader. Like you said, Tara, to connect. These are all connected issues. But please know that we are alive to the reality, because again, we come from these communities. We all have gone through, maybe not as much a challenge in some cases. So again, it's work in progress. We're going to keep at it. Thank you so much for sharing. We are honored that you shared your story and you joined us. And I hope kids are not too upset they went to school too early. But just, again, maybe as we wrap up, we need all of your help. As you just heard with these conversations, this is not just about trade per se. It's about livelihoods and prosperity and lifting everybody and deeply personal things, right? And so these are important conversations, and we have so much responsibility, if you will, as leaders in these communities, to help each other, to support each other. And it's work in progress. I mean, I want to set the expectation. This is still a long road to go ahead. We know the pandemic exposed some serious infirmities in our system. One stat that I often repeat, 1/4 of black-owned businesses, small businesses, shut down, and they would never come back after the pandemic. I mean, just think of that. And each of those businesses already had 2 or 3, employees, mostly in the black community. And what happened to those lives? Similar challenges that you just shared. So thank you again for sharing, and we'll take the feedback. And please know that this is why the administration is so focused on solving some of the challenges that you talked about. Looks like, Timothy, you're the last. There's some more folks here?
Jenny.
Oh, sorry, didn't see you. Do you want to go first, Jenny?
Yes.
Is that right?
Yeah. Yes.
Please.
Okay. Good morning. My name is Jenny Liu, and I am the commissioner in Michigan for Taiwan. And as you know, that I'm helping to develop and promote the U.S. and Taiwan trade, and also work on many issues such as recently we just reached the terms with the U.S. The trade representative in terms of the 21st tax and tariff between U.S. and Taiwan. And also we are working on another important issue that is the double taxation issue. And Taiwan is the top 10 trade partner with U.S. and we are the only one that we are paying the double taxation when we have the investment or when you open the office in here and we have to pay double taxation. So we are working on that, and I know we have bilateral agreements from the Senate and Congress, and hopefully we'll be able to overcome these issues. But on the other hand, I wear another hat. I'm the business owner of industrial fasteners manufacturer and master distributors business in Michigan for 30-some years. And
being in this business for so long, lucky enough, I do not have the funding issue. But we do have a very severe concern, which is the international logistic issue. And as many of the business owners like me, when we deal with the international trade, especially we do business with Taiwan, China, India, Vietnam, Thailand, and so we do a lot of business between those countries. So we will obviously have to use the international logistics such as a steamship line. And for the past 2 years, most of the business owners are facing a very severe challenge, because not only the pricing of the steamship line is increased more than 4 or 5 times. For example, a 40-foot container, we used to pay about $4,000 coming from Asian country to Detroit. The highest point that we paid last year was $26,000 for one container. So, and not only the pricing issue, but also the availability. So I wonder, from APEC point of view, that is there any way that from the federal level that we can reach, or we can have any of the regulation that with all of the international steamship line, so that we will not have this type of the issue, because this will impact the company severely.
By the way, how is that cost now?
The cost is coming down right now.
What is the figure now?
The figure is almost back to normal. The only one area is not back to normal is the US and India.
So
But with the Asian country, most of the area are back to normal. But this duration lasts almost 2 years.
Of course, and
Yeah.
obviously this was spurred by the once in a century phenomena of a pandemic and the effects of that. But again, we are learning from these experiences, from this data, and seeing can we have best practices across 21 nation economies to be able to manage with this, God forbid, it will happen again. But it's good to know that this is coming down. And by the way, this is not just even beyond APEC. The president passed a big head of EO and executive order on supply chain and logistics, and there's been a lot of focus on it. It may have receded from the news headlines, but folks have been working on making sure the ports are opening up. And you may recall that we had to put more trucks on the road in Long Beach and in Los Angeles area and on the East Coast as well. And all of that has helped as well, because there was a huge backlog. But thanks for sharing your feedback. I should mention here, by the way, that for Select USA Summit, Taiwan had I believe the biggest delegation.
We do.
Number two, 200 plus investors. Got down by just one. We got to bring it up next year. So. There's always more room there.
Yes,
Thank you. Thanks
thank
for
you.
your questions.
We just have a minute left,
So last but not least.
Yes.
All right, so I'll make it quick. My name is Timothy Ha. I'm serving as the Chief Investment Officer of the First Independent Bank, 53 years old bank, headquartered in downtown Detroit. We are the minority-owned bank, and then also the certified community development FI. So we're trying to serve the underserved communities, providing the banking service. I have 2 fun facts and then one just my personal experience as a banker. The APEC has only 30 followers. So Mr. Syed, you said that you're looking for 500,000 followers. There's a long way to go. So everybody here to click to follow the APEC so that we can reach that 500,000. Second one, you mentioned about the Bangladeshian. Bangladeshian is a minority in Hamtramck in Michigan these days. It used to be a Polish town. Now that Bangladeshian came in and then trying to provide a workforces in Hazel Park and then Highland Park, like a vicinity of Detroit. So they are the workforce for the some of the new companies coming into Michigan. Experience that I was trying to share is that I'm talking about the more of the personal newcomers to the Michigan. Business sector, the battery-related companies are plunging in. According to the Governor Whitmer's report, there will be about 16,000 new jobs going to be created. Now, companies doing fine. They can set up the bank accounts. They can have the lending. However, those newcomers to the state of Michigan, some of them, majority of them, cannot open the bank account because that they cannot have the social security number right away. It takes about 6 to 8 weeks to get the social security number. Majority of the banks require to have the social security number to open the bank account. They cannot have the personal level banking transaction. In order to buy a cell phone these days, you have to have a bank account. They cannot buy the cell phones without bank account. Our bank is trying to accommodate that, making sure that we're in compliance with the federal regulation to open the bank account so that they can buy a cell phone. That's the one fact. The other one, some of the executive director managers that coming from overseas international expats. They come in, company's great. This is company that $100 million to up to a $1 billion sales revenue, is super tier 1. They do not have a credit score in the US. They apply the credit card to Chase Bank of America. They got the personal credit card limit $200. They give it to the wife and 2 kids. They go to the Kroger trying to buy grocery shopping. Card is declined because they cannot go over the $200 per month. So we're trying to solve this type of finance, like a banking needs from these newcomers. I think that we need to have some kind of a systematic assistance from various departments. I think that it's more to the Department of the Treasury, but I think that we're trying to work it out on the ground level, but this is something that we're facing on a personal level.
Well, first of all, thank you for advocating for newcomers and who are helping our economy. I think all I would say is, there's a reason why some of those things are in place, right? And immigrants go through also a process, and the United States expats also go through a process when they go abroad. And I'll tell you that sometimes they don't get the services that you're offering it here, and the fact that we're having this conversation. So I'm empathetic with that. I can understand, but we will take this feedback. But the requirement of a social security number for a bank account, that's a general, and there's a reason for that, because you also want to make sure that we don't have unintended consequences, right? So, but I appreciate you sharing this, and I appreciate you serving these communities of new workers, right, who are contributing to our economy. So again, as we wrap up, thank you all for sharing this time, and more importantly, with candor, sharing incredibly important personal stories. I feel humbled to be here, and I hope this is the start of a conversation, and we can build on this. And thank you again for hosting
Special
us.
Representative Syed, thank you so much. I wanted to we appreciate also Deputy Assistant Secretary Phan and Matt Murray, the senior official Matt Murray, and of course Jennifer, who's our good local contact here.